Being here, it's time to call to order the Yamhill County Board of Commissioners formal session for May 10th, 2018. Desiree, would you lead us in the pledge?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. This is the time we have set aside for invocation. Commissioner Primozic?
Yes, it's my pleasure and privilege this morning to have a man who I don't think needs a lot of introduction to most of us. Jim had a very distinguished career in our criminal corrections department, and he and his wife both, actually, Chris and Jim, both worked for the county for several years. Jim, I have the honor and privilege of calling Jim a close friend, and he has agreed to come and do the invocation today. So, Jim Van Arsdale, thank you very much, and please go ahead.
The honor of the God you serve, and ask it on our heads.
Thank you.
Father, in your scripture, you instructed us to keep unity in a bond of peace. And today I ask your blessing on the agenda and on the participants in this general session, that we use wisdom, and that in the conversations that we respect each other as you would expect us to. Thank you for this great country, and thank you for the privilege of participating in the business at hand, running Yamhill County. Amen.
Amen.
Thanks, Jim.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you, Jim.
Good to see you. Okay, this is the time we have set aside for public comment. It's a time period reserved for public comment on anything else other than an agenda item or quasi-judicial land use item, and it looks like we have two people that would like to speak this morning. Caroline O'Brien, if you would state your name and your address for the record, please, and we'll just, thanks, Dave.
Do you mind if I sit?
Yes.
My name is Caroline O'Brien. I'm a McMinnville resident at 1591 Southwest Wright Street. I know that what I want to speak to you about isn't necessarily your purview. However, I absolutely am convinced that a participatory democracy is not that if you don't participate. So I'm here to participate. On April 22nd, a Sunday, I was in the library, and a man was being very obscene, loud. One of the librarians very politely asked this man to lower his voice and explained to him, if you use obscene language, we're going to ask you to leave. And he became very aggressive, called her a bitch, told her he didn't mind knocking women around, and this went on for several minutes of him just running his mouth. And I called the police, and he left, and they did later pick him up on a separate charge, and he was held for a while. I spoke with the officer who responded to this call, because one of the librarians had told me later, said if you hadn't called the police, I would have. We've had to ban him before. We've had problems with him over and over. And apparently the library policy is such that they can only ban someone with this kind of behavior for up to 90 days. However, I can't find a written policy either to back that up. So apparently they're just completely at the mercy of these people who come in over and over, and there's only so much they could do. And our public librarian should not have to babysit violent repeat offenders. So I found out since then this man has been arrested something like 30 times since 2015 or something. He's been arrested for assault, theft, menacing, strangulation. He's a bad dude. So I spoke with the officer about what had happened because they'd been released after being picked up. And I had written a statement about what had happened. On Sunday afternoon after it happened, I wrote a statement, turned it into the police the next day on Monday, thinking that he would be charged with a hate crime. And I later spoke with the officer, and he said, well, we kind of thought it was like a freedom of speech, Second Amendment right thing kind of thing. And I thought, well, so if he had walked into the library and said, yeah, you faggot, I don't mind knocking around queers, that would be a violent homophobe committing a hate crime in the library. Or if he had said, yeah, Jew, I don't mind knocking Jews around, you'd say that's an anti-Semitic violent person committing a hate crime. But he said, called a woman a bitch, threatened all women in general, and for some reason this is not considered a hate crime. Now, and the officer was very kind and understanding. He said, I completely understand your point of view. And I personally, I understand the purpose of hate crime laws. I think it is unfortunate that we have to have them, because I think all people should be protected by our laws. You shouldn't have to create a specific category to protect them. However, it's a tool that we can use to keep this guy from going back into the library and threatening more people and possibly becoming violent, because he has a history of violence against women. So I've been trying to chase around all the information on this. He got picked up again on the 30th. And when I called the officer, and he called me back, and I explained what was going on, I said, I've talked to the DA's office, they have no charges. I said, I spoke to the victim's advocate, she said to call you. And he said, well, I don't have your statement here. He said, I sent it over to his parole officer. So if you call the parole officer. So the next morning I called Officer Spencer, and she was very helpful. I'm so sorry.
If you want to just...
No.
All right, so I spoke to Officer Spencer, explained what was going on. She said, well, it's a parole sanction, so he violated his parole, but we can only hold him for a while because the sanction itself is being held in the jail, which gets him off the street for a while. But she said, I have a grid I go off of. And I said, what's your grid? And she said, well, it's what he did compared to what he has done and what he's actually been convicted for, and how much potential there is for him to reoffend in this way. And I said, well, if you go on the Internet, and I am lousy on the Internet, I am too old for the Internet, but I even managed to look up constant situations of him being picked up for menacing and assault. And this is not once in a while, this is over and over. And she said, I don't know what to tell you. We can only hold him for so long, but you might call the police officer again and spoke to him. And I did call him back. This man is so patient with me. And he told me that at the time it had happened, the library had declined to press charges. And I said, well, I want to press charges. I'm the one he was looking at when he was saying, I don't mind knocking around women. And he said, well, he said, I don't know what to tell you on that. Now, that was actually when I was talking to him before he told me to call the parole officer. So the parole officer told me there's something called a CCH, Computer Criminal History. So I'm in the process of trying to get that from the Oregon State Police, but there's a fee to get that, and it's some kind of thing you do on the Internet where you apply, and I'm going to probably go to Salem to do this because the Internet is just not working for me. My concern is that we have a situation where there was a safety net, right? We have a police department, we have 911, we have a municipal government, we have librarians, we have library managers, but there's only so much they can do. And I, as a citizen, do not think, even though I participate in my democracy, and I don't mind that, but no citizen should have to take so much time away from their work to chase around this kind of problem when we have structures in place to handle this so that citizens don't have to call parole officers and the police and go back over again and then go and call Salem. And this is why we have these structures in place. I am absolutely convinced this man is going to assault women, and he's getting out on Monday the 14th. So I'm going to go back to the police department. I rephrased my statement so that I can try and get someone to file a hate crime on this guy to at least slow him down. But I mean, the friend that was with him that day in the library is his girlfriend, who apparently had ended up at Henderson House because he's been violent with her. So if we have a society in which we encourage our citizens to participate, what about the ones who don't know how to read and write clearly enough and formulate information and search out the people to talk to and analyze the information? Because if I fall through the net, there are a lot of other people falling through the net. And I think that's something we should worry about. Thank you very much.
Thanks for coming, Caroline.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Joining us now, Jean. Hi, Jean. Jean, if you would state your name and your address for the record, please.
My name is Jean Beck, and I live on Amity Road in Amity. Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm president of the National Alliance on Mental Illness affiliated in Yamhill County, Yamhill County. Many of you probably are familiar with our work, so I'll take just a few moments to mention a few of our services to the citizens of the county. Mental illness is a pervasive problem, and approximately 1 in 4 adults is diagnosed with 1 or more brain disorders in a given year. Given that statistics, it is very likely that you know someone with a mental illness. In Yamhill County alone, with its population of 100,000 people, more than 18,000 adults and 2,400 youths experience mental illness in a given year, and 6,000 adults in Yamhill County live with a major mental illness such as schizophrenia, major depression, or bipolar disorder. People living with mental illness need help and hope. They need a community that supports them, their families, and their recovery. NAMI Yamhill County is an all-volunteer organization which strives to help individuals living with mental illness and their families through support, education, and advocacy. Our monthly meetings, which are open to all, focus on educating our peers and our families about suicide prevention, medication, health insurance, and Yamhill County criminal justice system, and many other related issues. Our volunteers teach free classes, lead support groups, and provide resource information to family members and individuals living with mental illness. Our signature educational programs include Family to Family, a series of 12-week educational classes for family caregivers and friends of individuals living with mental illness, a client speaker program in which trained speakers share compelling personal stories about living with mental illness and achieving recovery, and peer-to-peer, a series of 10 sessions for people with living with mental illness who wish to establish and maintain wellness. All of these programs are provided free of charge. Additionally, for outreach and education, our members set up booths and distribute literature at a number of fairs throughout the county. We provide 4 support groups each month, 3 in McMinnville and 1 in Newburgh, for families living with mental illness. I'm extremely proud to say that for the second year in a row, NAMI Yamhill County has the second highest number of participants in our family support groups in the state, second only to Multnomah. This year we also added a peer support group and 5 suicide bereavement support groups, which meet twice monthly. Interestingly, we have persons attending from other counties in the state, so there definitely is a need. As part of our advocacy, our members attend monthly meetings of many local organizations. We work with Yamhill County's Court Coordinated Services Program to help those individuals with mental illness who are in the criminal justice system. We've also been involved with Yamhill County Behavioral Health in educating law enforcement officers about mental illness through the Crisis Intervention Team CIT program. Finally, we visit with our state legislatures in support of issues related to mental health. In order for us to support our programs, we need to raise funds, and our major opportunity is through the NAMI Northwest Walk, a fundraiser organized by the National Alliance on Mental Illness of Oregon, which will be held on Sunday, May 20th in Portland. We encourage all who care about and for loved ones with mental illness to support this walk. NAMI is a 501c3 charity, and any donation is welcome and tax deductible. I have attached a brochure with our information about us and about our activities. Thank you very much for your attention and for allowing me to speak.
Thank you, Jean. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you, and thank you for all the work you do.
Thank you.
It's really exciting, especially the fact that we have so many people coming from other parts of the state. That's amazing to me.
Says a lot.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jean. Next, would like to invite our Oregon Emergency Management, actually we're going to talk about the Oregon Emergency Management exercise with our Emergency Manager, Brian Young. And Brian, come on up. There are a couple of things as the liaison to emergency management. I just want to say a little bit about Brian before he gets started. For those of you who are not familiar, Brian has worked in our Sheriff's Department as a sergeant and comes to us as our emergency manager with that experience and with that background, which I think is really critical. I've seen Brian just come in and just totally own this program and really build on it with a lot of enthusiasm, and just to watch during the full-scale exercise last Friday, just to see how he had everything pretty much figured out and really had a good grasp on the whole system and all of the different jurisdictions that were there. So a couple of things, if you could, Brian, talk about the full-scale exercise, why we do them, what this one was about, also about the emergency notification system test, which we did last Friday, and then also there's a component that the commissioners like them to discuss, and that is our involvement as part of the emergency activation plan. So welcome.
Thank you, and thank you for the kind words. So I appreciate the support from county administration and the commissioners, and thank you for letting me be here today. Just a quick, I guess, a recap on our exercise on Friday. We had our annual full-scale exercise, and it revolved around a mass fatality event. And it was very true to life, if you will, on a couple of incidents that happened, one in the south in, I want to say, Arkansas or Alabama, and one up in Canada where buses were involved, and it was kind of interesting to see that our planning started well before those, and it can happen here. So we had multiple participants from throughout the county, both as participants in the exercise as far as players, and also volunteers out at the exercise sites. So we had participants from the Yamhill County Sheriff's Office, Yamhill County Public Health and Human Services, the Juvenile Department, Yamhill County Facilities, the City of Newburgh, McMinnville Fire, West Valley Fire District, Lima Valley Medical Center, the Red Cross, CERT, Aries, Lincoln County Sheriff's Office, Office of Emergency Management, the Oregon Health Authority, McMinnville Cooperative Ministries, and I'm sure there's probably more, but I don't have them listed, and I apologize if I've missed anybody. The reason why I bring that list up is because this is the largest exercise participant-wise that Yamhill County has ever had. There were 118 participants in 3 locations. One location was Willamette Valley Medical Center, where they worked on a family reunification center and a mass decon drill, decontamination drill. It was awesome to get them involved and work through their processes, and they're a great partner in getting out into the community or having a place for the community to go for family members who are hospitalized. The other location was the McMinnville Cooperative Ministries, and that was where we had a family assistance center set up. Family assistance center functions separately from the family reunification center, and in that this is where grieving families come for maybe the lost loved ones, the property of those loved ones, and for mental health counseling because of the event. There were some early challenges in exercise design and staffing the EOC. We have to draw from a pool countywide, and it came together, and we had a packed house in the EOC. I didn't think it was going to be that packed this year like last year, but it was, but it was good. We had good participation. The only concerning part in that is if we have a countywide disaster or a large-scale disaster, that those folks that are involved in the EOC are going to be tending to their own needs in their own communities. So those are issues that we'll work towards and get through. A couple of other things that we came across were just situational awareness, and that's based on experience, or people that staff the EOC just don't do it often enough. So we'll be addressing some of those things. I will tell you that this exercise was a success. This is the first time that we are aware of in the state of Oregon where a family assistance center was incorporated into an exercise and successfully deployed, if you will. Nowhere in the state, we had state liaisons from the Oregon Health Authority that were racking their brains trying to figure out if counties have put this into play to address this situation prior to the need of needing to use one in rural world. And they couldn't come up with any. Nope, we haven't done it. Nope, we haven't. Well, Yamhill County has done it. So we are working towards getting a guide, if you will, working with Public Health, Amy Egan, and working with her on getting a guide put together on how to activate a family assistance center if the need arises, and I hope it doesn't. It's difficult to get those family assistance centers up and running in exercise because of the amount of HHS employees that it's going to involve from the behavioral health side, the public health professionals that need to participate. Red Cross stepped up huge in that area also, and they're more than willing to be good partners in that area. So that's it in a nutshell on the exercise piece. There'll be more coming in an after-action report, but that's just a high-level view. Part of that exercise involved our first mass notification annual test. I'm going to also consider that a success. We had an alert go out to 17,195 contacts that we have preloaded in the system. Of those, and that does not include, we did not include the businesses for this exercise because we didn't want to disrupt their business during business hours on a Friday. Of that, we had 2,449 confirm immediately, 87 confirmed late. In looking at the data, there were several, a lot that answered the phone and then hung up. I don't know why, I don't know what the motivation is, but again, I think it was a success, it worked. And I gauged that partly on some of the neighboring counties, when they issue alerts, some of the feedback that they get from their community has been, I mean, they've even had to adjust their schedules to address those concerns, and we got a handful of calls, even a couple saying, hey, nice job, to, hey, the voice wasn't loud enough, and the caller ID didn't come through. Very minor things we will look at and we have to look at, but very minor in comparison to what other counties have gone through. So I do consider that a success, and thank you for the participation.
Thank you.
If I can add one more thing, and I think this will probably segue into a piece that you want to talk about. During our exercise, we were able to establish the PIO group in a virtual Joint Information Center. It's the first time we've ever tried to do a virtual Joint Information Center where public information officers from various agencies can come in either via email, the employee side of the notification system, through a conference call line that is set up in that system, and it was good. It worked out well. There were a couple of minor IT issues with the network blocking the social media aspect of it. Those are small bumps in the road that we can surmount very easily. But that's one part of the PIO aspect, and I think that's probably the biggest hiccup in the whole thing that was identified. So it was good to be able to spool up a virtual JIC in the FEMA nomenclature and get it rolling and have those folks be able to communicate.
Thank you. One of the points that you brought up during that full-scale exercise was, according to Oregon statute and according to our ordinance, which is 883, if you want to look it up, the Board of Commissioners is tasked with, according to statute and to the ordinance, which is Emergency Management Division is directly responsible to the Board of Commissioners, and then it goes from chair to vice chair all the way down in terms of we need to be able to be accessible and to be able to get on board with a number of different things. We need to be able to get together on a phone call, a virtual meeting, and since it is a public meeting, as you brought up, we really need to have this recorded. Maybe we go through YCOM. But the board will pass a state of emergency if there's an imminent threat, and then we might also declare a state of emergency. And there's so many different aspects to that. So the component I'd like to see in the next exercise is that the board is brought into this per what our ordinance suggests, but I don't know if you have any recommendations on how we can be able to be, are we reached? What if it's on a weekend? What if it's at night? How are we going to ascertain that we can get the commissioners or the majority of the commissioners on board on a phone call to discuss next steps?
Perfect. I think that's a great idea to exercise that that function. There's a couple of things that we have the ability to do that through our Everbridge notification system. It's very simple, and eventually you guys will be set up. We're in phase 2 now of the implementation of that system. We're getting into the employee side now. So it's very easy to establish and very easy to get the message and call in, and we can have, I think, 99 people on one call. I don't think we'll ever reach that, but so the capability is there. One of the things that you mentioned, and I'm going to have to defer to legal counsel on that, is the ability to, or the need to record the call. And if it's a disaster declaration type thing, does it need to be recorded? There's been some conversations about that, but that's certainly not in my purview, and I would default to counsel on that. The system that we currently use or could use for that does not record. Traditionally, the recording could go through YCOM. It's no different than a police officer using the YCOM line, if you will, for a telephonic search warrant for a DUI arrest, that type of thing. Those are recorded and then submitted into evidence as part of that case, and I think that route would be no different here. So those are avenues that we could certainly explore along with IT and with county council.
Good.
So just so that we have to remember what we're tasked with, and also make sure that we're included in this next time, so we can, do what we need to do.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm sure there are certainly provisions for emergency meetings, and the requirement is that we either have a recording or written minutes. So if in the event we were not able to get a recording, as long as we had written minutes, I think we would still be in compliance.
Yeah.
And I view that as a procedural thing that we could set up in-house that would satisfy those requirements.
Okay, Commissioner, did you have something?
Yeah, we were in a meeting last night in Yamhill we had a town hall meeting, and Commissioner Sterrett was talking about our emergency notification system and the test that was run on Friday, and there's a young lady there who is a student at McMinnville High School, but her cell phone is on our notification system. So she said, "Oh yeah." So it covers a broad spectrum of our population and of our citizens, and is a critical piece. And just appreciate all the efforts that you put in, Brian, to making that happen. I know it's been since Commissioner Sterrett was elected, it's been one of her main driving desires. So it's just great to see, and to have over 17,000 calls go out means that a large segment of our population was at least aware of this happening, and if it were truly a real event, we could certainly notify people what's going on and keep the speculation, the level of undocumented problems to a minimum. So thank you very much, and thank you, Commissioner Sterrett, for making it such a big thing for you.
Madam Chair, just a couple things. First of all, I'd like to congratulate Brian and all of our partners on that Friday exercise. I think it was, everything I've heard from other people, it's gone very well. I'd like to thank you for spearheading this effort on the emergency notification system, this emergency management. It kind of hit home to me when Brian was talking about the bus accident that happened in Arkansas and these mass casualty incidents, because with my background in fire sciences and emergency medical services, a lot of people don't realize that we did have a true mass casualty school bus incident in Yamhill County in the middle of the 70s, where we had several fatalities. And I look at that as a real life experience, and I look at what we're doing now and what this exercise proved off. And if I look at the way that incident was handled, because there wasn't any such thing as emergency operations, and what we're doing now, I'm a firm believer that if we would have experienced that same real-life tragedy today, that the number of mass casualties and the number of fatalities would have been decreased, because of things like Brian and yourself and all of the other emergency services in Yamhill County, our private partners such as Willamette Valley. I feel very confident in Yamhill County, if we have that kind of accident again, the results will really be minimized. So Brian, I think for you and your staff and everybody else should be congratulated on getting this done.
Very much so. It was a real confidence builder to watch them in action, to see that they had every detail down. And I can tell you that because we're all crammed into this one tiny room in the basement, which has not been optimal, we are going to hope that next year, when you do this again, you're going to have larger space, better facilities, and you won't be climbing all over each other, because it was really hard, but you did a great job with the limitations that you had. And it was great to watch you work, so I'm just very grateful that you're manning that position. So anyway, thank you for what you've done and for bringing us up to speed on this.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Brian. All right, let's move on to the consent agenda. And do we have a motion to approve?
I would make a motion that we approve the consent agenda as it's presented in our agenda.
We have a motion to approve. Is there any further discussion? All right, hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Let the record show Commissioners Primizich, Olson, and Starrett voted in the affirmative. On to old business, we have none. On to item D, other business. Counselor?
Yeah, Madam Chair, we discussed on Tuesday the acquisition of some property located at 335 Northeast 6th Street here in McMinnville. We're ready to move forward with that purchase. However, inadvertently, it was left off of the agenda. Just to give you an update, if you recall, the timing on this acquisition is tight, and so we're hoping to be in a position to close before the end of May. Towards that end, an inspection has been scheduled for next week, and I've also spoken to an environmental consulting firm that can complete the phase 1 on the property within the next 10 days. So those were the two biggest immediate items. Beyond that, the title report has come back, and it looks fine so far. So I think we're on track, hopefully, to meet that May 31st closing date. So as we had talked about on Tuesday, what we'd ask the board to do today would be to give your final approval to the execution of the purchase and sale agreement, as well as the acquisition of the property at 335 Northeast 6th Street, subject to the satisfactory acceptance of the conditions as set forth in the agreement, and subject to the final review and approval of County Council's office.
Thank you, Christian. So do we have a motion to approve?
I would make that motion as it was just presented by County Council. I won't try and use the same verbiage. I thought he did a great job. So that is my motion.
Discussion, Madam Chair?
Motion to approve. Now, is there any further discussion?
Yes. I'm all for this because we own pieces of property in that general block. I think it makes sense to do this. I am continued to be concerned about the amount of property Yamhill County leases and rents downtown, and the amount of property we own in the core business area. I find it hard myself to continue to approve additional rents, leases, or purchases of property in the downtown area, but for this particular one, I just want to make sure that I go on record saying that I am for this piece of property, because we do own one of the buildings on that block already, and I think for this particular piece of property, it makes sense for the county to go ahead and run this through and finish this.
All right, we have a motion to approve. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Motion passes unanimously. Let the record show Commissioners Primizich, Starrett, and Olson voted in the affirmative. Thank you, Christian, for that. Public hearings, we have none. Announcements.
The only announcement is, the commissioners the next couple of weeks the rest of the month have some very busy schedules, as do staff, and I know we're all kind of going to be going to some of our separate ways to different events, and I just want to say I appreciate my fellow commissioners and all the hard work they put in during the budget period to get the budget through, and especially to our budget and compensation committee. So with that, I don't have any other further comments.
Commissioner?
No, I just want to indicate that we are moving forward with our economic development with SEDCOR, and we had a chance, everybody had a chance to meet Abishai, our person from SEDCOR that will be housed here in McMinnville and Yamhill County. And I met with her this morning briefly to discuss the first report to the board, which will be coming in June. And the president of SEDCOR and and Abishai will be here to lay out what has happened so far, what their plans are for the immediate and near future. So I'm very excited about the opportunities presented in working with SEDCOR and the relationship that they have with the McMinnville Economic Development Partnership, being housed in that same office. I think it really gives us a two-pronged approach to economic development in Yamhill County. So I'm excited about that.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Yeah.
If there's nothing else for the good of the order, we'll adjourn today's meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.